All right, so this just going to be a quick little video here. This is just something that was floating around in my head, and it comes from earlier. What I don't remember now if it was this morning or yesterday or whatever, but there was a conversation on Facebook about starting and training horses that are dominant within the herd, and the general consensus was that they are harder to train. The dominant horse is harder to train, and I totally disagree with that. I couldn't disagree with that more, and here's several reasons why. So let me go back a little bit, give you a little history here. This is something that wasn't even kind of sort of on my radar until, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. I'd never thought about whether the horse was dominant or submissive within its own social structure. Didn't matter to me, and to be honest, it still doesn't matter to me. The only reason it matters to me is for the sake of discussion. But it was the third or fourth year that they'd had Road to the Horse, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of Road to the Horse. And I'll just throw this out there, guys, that I spent almost the entirety of my 20s living on remote ranches without TV or internet, so the fact that I didn't know about Road to the Horse, like I just didn't know about it. And we were in South Florida, and there was a guy that we'd gotten to know real well. We all called him Man Daddy. There's a story behind that, but it doesn't matter. But he was a professional horseshoer, darn good horseshoer, and then started quite a few colts on the side. And he invited us and a bunch of other people over for like a barbecue / cold beer drinking to watch Road to the Horse. And he was so excited about the fact that that year the rules had changed and the contestants didn't just draw lots. They let there not be light. The contestants didn't draw lots. They drew who got to pick, and so they could observe these colts and pick them. And I was like, well, who cares? You got 6 hours. Like, what difference does it make? And he was going on about, well, they can observe which is a dominant horse and which is a submissive horse, and so that they've got an advantage if they pick a more submissive horse. And that was, to me, it was just like what? Like, who gives a tinker's damn? You're a colt starter. That's your job, to start colts. It makes no difference if it's dominant, submissive, whatever. And it kind of got me thinking about it. And I wrote a chapter about this in my book, but I did, trust me, I did a ton of research. So this isn't my opinion. These are the facts. So within horse culture, dominance or submission is not a character trait. It's learned. So if a horse is dominant, it's because he learned to be dominant. He or she learned to be dominant. It's not a character trait. Which, to break that down further, is so if you take in wild horses, there's usually a mare that leads the band. You know, in Hollywood, the stud is the head character, but all the stud really does is, well, you guys know what studs do. They just run around and act like fools, and you know, I know what studs do. It's been a good part of my life acting like one. But they don't really have much say in what goes on. It's the mare that drives the herd and goes to the water holes and the this and that. So to say it's not a character trait means that it's not that one of her daughters inherits the role of lead mare. She may or may not. She oftentimes does, because she learns from her dam how to be the lead mare. So she oftentimes does, but this isn't like 16th century France, where, you know, monarchies are passed down based on how you're bred. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with if you know what's going on, where's going on, how to get there, blah, 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 blah. This has been documented in elephants, hippopotami, which are a horse's closest relative, multiple mammals, humans included. It's not a character trait. It's not something you're born with to be a leader or to not be a leader. You learn to be the leader. And so with horses, and back to our wild horse deal, back to what I was saying is that, so where the water holes are, where to go, how to get there, blah, blah, blah. And that's how she becomes the head mare. Whether her dam was the dominant mare or one of the more submissive mares doesn't have anything to do with it. It has to do with how she learns. So now let's go into a more modern version of horses. So I've got an old gelding, and he's 18, 19, something like that. So he always ends up being the dominant horse in any situation. Eventually he does. And it's not because he's aggressive or he's rude or anything like that. It's not a character trait. I think the producer wants me to say an innate character trait, perhaps. Anyway, it's not necessarily who he is. He's actually a very submissive animal. It is because he has been on dozens and dozens of ranches. He's been to hundreds of horse shows and rodeos. He's been hauled back and forth across the country. I don't know actually how many times, lots of times. He knows more than other horses do. And so I'll get to that other part next. And so consequently, no matter what situation you put him in, he knows more than all the other horses do. The consequence is he always becomes the dominant personality within any horse herd, any horse group. And it doesn't matter what other horses you put in there or what their experiences are, because he always has more experience. So if you take him, his name's Tough, if you take Tough and you put him in with a bunch of yearlings on a place he's never been, he will actually be the submissive horse for a day or two until he figures out where the water is, what time we get fed, and where the boundaries are. Take him a day or two. And then he's the dominant horse. Not because he's an aggressive horse, it's because he knows better. It would be the same as if you took me and dropped me on a deserted island with a bunch of 11-year-olds. I would become the dominant character in that situation, in that tribe. Not because I'm necessarily a dominant person, because I'm really not. It is because I know more than a bunch of 11-year-olds do. And so I would know what to do next, how to make a fire, when to lay down and go to sleep, blah, 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 blah. It's just knowing stuff. If you take me and you put me into, 11-year-olds, there's a 5th grade or 6th graders? Yeah, something like that. If you put me into a 6th grade class of 11-year-olds and just put me there and said, I would be the most submissive animal in that room, because I don't know what goes on. I don't know what time we do this. I don't know what time we eat lunch. I don't know. And so I would have to now it would only take me a few days to figure out the routine. And then again, I would be the dominant animal in that group because I know more than a whole bunch of 11-year-olds do. This is how it works over and I'm breaking that down like simple. But this is how it works over and over and over again in all mammalian societies. And like the U.S. military is one of the best ways to look at this and see, like, the general's the general because he knows more than the private does. So we take our horse, that same horse Tough that I was talking about. You put him in with a bunch of babies in a pen he's never been in. He'll be submissive for a minute until he figures out where everything is. As soon as he figures things out, then he's the dominant. Now, why is he the dominant? 1, because he knows more. 2, because he's more athletic. And The athleticism will always prevail. Always. Every single time. The most athletic horse in the group. The most athletic horse and the most learned horse will always be the dominant horse. And it will be the most learned, then the most athletic. Tough happens to be the most learned and the most athletic. He's 18, but he's kind of a ninja, so he gets away with it. The next thing that we're going with there, with the athleticism and the dominance and the learned, I had a point, but I think I've forgotten what it was. But I love that we can edit this. Oh, yes, okay, all right. Now we're back from that brain fart. Now I remember what I was going with. So another thing with Tough is, like I was saying, is he always ends up being the dominant horse, the dominant personality in any herd that I've ever put him in. Well, part of that is because he knows me. He knows us. He knows how we do things. So it might take him a minute to figure out where the boundaries are, where the water is, yada, yada, yada. But he knows that at 6 o'clock there's breakfast. He knows that at 5 o'clock there's dinner. He knows. So there's no place I've ever put that horse where he didn't have the rules already established. And all the rest of the horses a lot of times didn't know what was going to happen next, but Tough always did. He always knew, because I'm consistent, he always knew exactly what was going to happen. And so, boom, he's always gone to the dominant end of the spectrum because he knew what was going on, and then secondarily because he was the most athletic. And I'll take just a moment and talk about the athleticism. If you take a bunch of horses and none of them know what's going on, it'll always be the most athletic horse. Always, every single time. So in that Road to the Horse deal, where all the colts come from the same outfit and they get thrown into the deal, and you get, I don't know how much time they get. They get a few minutes to observe them or whatever, and they get to pick their horse based on whether it's dominant or submissive. I would pick the most dominant one because that's the most athletic one. Every time. Every single time I would pick the most athletic one. Give me confirmation or give me death. Anyway, I would always pick the most athletic. I would pick the most dominant one if none of them know what's going on. Because the most athletic one is the one that will be dominant. So one that maybe was submissive in other situations because he didn't know where the things were or what happened or what time things happened or this and that. Maybe even isn't the smartest one. And like the difference between a smart horse and a dumb horse is like that. It's not much. They're all dumber than me, which is pretty dumb. But I always want to look for the most athletic horse. So consequently, I'm always looking for the most dominant horse. The more athletic horse will be more dominant. Okay, so now heading towards the downhill side of this. If you are having trouble with your horse because it is a dominant horse, it is your fault. It is not the fact that the horse is a dominant horse. That should not make training harder. That shouldn't make starting harder. That shouldn't make anything harder. All that means is that you are a bad leader. You're a bad leader, Petey. And I don't know Petey, but the Fantastic Mr. Fox is a fantastic movie, and that's a great line. That was a terrible song, Petey. You wrote a bad song. Anyway, if you're having trouble with your horse and it's because it's a dominant horse and this and that, that's because you are not being a leader. So back to this original question, this original statement about the dominant horses are harder to train. Well, not for me, they're not, because I'm always dominant. I am always the dominant character in a horse and human relationship. And that is because I am consistent. I am the only one that knows what's going on. and I can change the rules. I can make myself dominant by changing the rules and being the one that knows what's going on, and the horse doesn't. That's all that dominance is one character knows what's going on, what's going to happen next, the other character doesn't. The character that doesn't is submissive, the character that does is dominant. So I have the ability to change the rules to be the one that knows what's going to happen. So I'm always dominant. Now that doesn't, I'm not talking about like I roll in there and I act like Clint Eastwood and thump on everybody. I mean, yeah, sometimes violence happens, and for you Karen horse huggers, violence isn't poking the horse in the eye or whipping him with a stick or whatever. Violence is a show of great speed and athleticism. Yeah, so sometimes I do things fast and show the horse that I have some violence in me, and then they don't know what I'm going to do next. That is how you create dominance. That is how you become the dominant character within the relationship. And so if you're having trouble with your horse because you're not the dominant character, because your horse is dominant, then it's you who's fouling up. It's you who is not being dominant. Again, doesn't mean go hit them with a pry bar. That's not how horses do it. Horses do it by knowing what time you feed, where the boundaries are, what time you eat, where the feed is, etc. So all you have to do is be the one that knows, and then whether the horse is dominant, submissive, whatever, it makes no difference within his own culture. It only makes a difference with you, and so you need to always be the dominant character.
I want to thank the subscribers of our Patreon channel. The patrons, that's Patron where I'm from, give us the opportunity to bring these videos to you all. Without them, this channel wouldn't be possible. Join us over on Patreon for more in-depth lessons and step-by-step instruction on everything from gear to theory, riding everything from colts to bridle horses, the circus pole, and husbandry. We'd love to see you all over there.